So in this segment, we're going to be discussing the treatment of Sue Gray, and I think this is important because it does show you the operation under Keir Starmer is very, very disjointed. People keep blaming the Downing Street operation, but really, at the head of it is Starmer and the ministers. They're the ones who pick these special advisors. And so if you're picking crappy advisors, you're going to get bad advice, and ultimately you're not going to get very far. And I think this situation's highlighted by Sue Gray, which people didn't like because she was being paid more than them, despite the fact that they were asked to receive pay cuts or receive less money than Tory special advisors did. And so you can see why there was resentment there. But ultimately, I think she was a person who was actually good at her job. And that was one of the other things that caused resentment as well. There's rumours and stories about her trying to involve herself in meetings that may not concern her, things like that. But, fundamentally, I think it's just a lot of jealous people, certain people who have replaced her, who were jealous of her role and her influence, and other people who are jealous of her salary. The accusations of this being a boys' club. People trying to argue that, well, how could it be a boys' club when, you got Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper, and all of these women in positions of power? Like, to make that argument, you'd have to be a complete moron, because then you would have to argue that, Johnson isn't sexist or racist because he gave us the first two Asian chancellors. He gave us the Asian, the first and second Asian Home Secretaries in like Patel and Braverman as well, or definitely from minority background. So we're going to make the argument that, Boris Johnson isn't racist? Please, come on. So, just because you have representation does not mean any sense of equality, or doesn't mean you're a good person. Not really. But let's have a listen to this.
Britain needs stability, not more chaos.
She attended Labour's manifesto launch. She was meant to have planned its first 100 days in office, but there have been persistent high-level leaks criticising her actions in government, and she was gone on day 93.
They wanted her out less than 100 days in.
Culture that allows that level of briefing is a toxic culture in which trust is eroded.
The Keir Starmer you suspect might have read the Riot Act to people in their new jobs. Don't let this briefing happen again.
I certainly hope so.
And the irony is, one of the things she was brought in was to stop the leaks and things like that. And ultimately, I think she did that initially. And so that might have been one of the things that bred, more resentment. She might have been able to actually figure out who was doing the leaking, or at least deal with certain people. And that might have caused resentment as well, because I think fundamentally she's actually good at her job.
I've had the Riot Act occasionally from Keir. He's quite good at it.
I suspect people may have thought that I am perhaps too much of a challenger or a disruptor. I am both.
Sue Gray explaining a previous hiccup in her career. She attended last year's party conference. Her critics say she tried to downgrade or drop many Labour advisers in office. She told friends it was a quality issue. Her critics said she was building a power base.
A quality issue. She's trying to get rid of people who aren't very good at their job. And when we look at the Downing Street operation, these guys are absolutely washed, and they deserve the treatment. Let's be honest now. Like, the comms team, we have a situation which we'll be discussing where you have a minister being thrown under the bus for calling P&O a rogue operator, justifiably so that she said that. But, we've got not briefings against her, but we've got kind of her being thrown under the bus. Like, the operation is a complete mess. And that fundamentally comes from the top, the head of the tree, which is Keir Starmer. So, she is right. It is a quality issue. When you look at the SPADs involved now, when you look at some of the policies coming out and things like that, complete morons.
Morgan McSweeney watching Keir Starmer speak before the election campaign he masterminded. He's tried being chief of staff before, and Keir Starmer seems to be getting through them.
And, this is that guy now. Morgan McSweeney is the new chief of staff, so you can see who has benefited from Sue Gray being ousted. Keir Starmer's really not beating the boys' club allegations here.
Were you getting flashbacks when you heard about Keir Starmer getting rid of a chief of staff?
Not flashbacks. I've done all my processing and, dealt with my unresolved feelings on the subject. Morgan McSweeney, in his first tour of duty as chief of staff, did about 15 months before my appointment. I did about 15 months. I think Sue's done something similar. So there seems to be a natural flow of these things.
Maybe in 15 months' time, that guy will be back in the role, because it's a bit ridiculous to fire a guy and bring him back later on. And, one of the problems Labour is running into is there isn't much to talk about. I know people keep talking about silly season and all of this nonsense, right? It was partly true, but it's partly nonsense as well. Like, ultimately, the news cycle hasn't had a lot in it. And so people are going to go off the stories that are kind of smaller. But, when you've got a situation where you've got, a senior member of his team, his chief of staff, being pushed out because a bunch of people are jealous of her salary and her role, that does show you that there is there is a lot of toxicity within the advisors, within, ministers' advisors effectively. And that's not good. That's not how you run a smooth operation if there's so much animosity there regarding money and influence.
1 days to come up with.
This is about the budgets that have come out, once a prime minister's taken over. So once a new party's basically come in.
With his first budget. After Labour's last landslide, it took the team 62 days to produce a budget. David Cameron's government's first budget came 47 days after the election. But Keir Starmer's government will have been in office for 118 days before Rachel Reeves gets round to unveiling her first budget.
And this is one of the dumb things where, one of the things you would expect once a new party comes in is to unveil a budget. Even if it's like a mini budget, not like a Liz Truss thing, but just to get things moving and talk about your kind of economic priorities. And this really sets the tone for where a government can go. And so we haven't had anything like that. All we've had is talk of the 22 billion black hole and all of this kind of stuff. A lot of negativity, a lot of doom and gloom. But what really the people want, I think, is optimism. Something to be happy about, something to believe in. And I don't think the government's really been doing that at all. They've kind of changed tactics. I think they realised all the negative talk is really bringing down kind of economic faith within the country. That's one of the big problems. But ultimately, this need to kind of get moving. Some of the workers' rights legislation is good, but I think they need to start making tangible changes for people.
The Labour government's been defined by its only spending action, which is to take away the winter fuel allowance from 10 million pensioners. And so while waiting for the budget, the only indication of Labour's priorities, it seems that we want to take money away from welfare and from older people.
Side by side, early in Sue Gray's tenure, Morgan McSweeney has now had his first full day in the job. Keir Starmer hoping a campaign strategist can do what a career civil servant could not.
No, I think the chief of staff role is more of an administrative role anyway. So picking McSweeney, I don't think is great, especially when he was apparently in the role before and he couldn't do it. It's a much bigger operation now. But when it comes to the point the person made earlier regarding the winter fuel allowance, that has been the biggest story. And I get kind of Phil says older people read newspapers. It's one of the reasons the newspapers are running that story. But ultimately, that is one of the big kind of decisions that Rachel Reeves has made so far. And it's such a dumb, mind-blowing decision, how stupid it is. It does show you how kind of bad the operation is in Downing Street. It doesn't really make sense. What Starmer has done, what Reeves has done here, ultimately, in my opinion, doesn't make any sense and is really politically inept. But also, the policy doesn't make sense in the first place. They're just carrying on here. There's stories around Sue Gray might be receiving a peerage so she can serve as an envoy for nations and regions in the House of Lords. So her role hasn't been fully cemented yet. And one of the other issues is that we still don't know. She's not even at the the summit for some of the meetings she should be at in her new role, because she hasn't officially been put into that role yet. So it's caused a massive delay. Like this has not been a smooth transition at all. This is Baroness Warsley talking about it.
Do you work much with Sue Gray?
I did.
Are you a fan?
I'm a huge fan, actually. I think Sue is one of those lifelong civil servants who has worked with many, many governments of different colours.
So did you make a mistake to go party political, in your view?
I think that Labour needed somebody of that calibre to really help them get ready for government. I think there is no doubt. Look, there has been an internal struggle within Labour. There have been different factions within the leadership and within Keir's office.
And we've seen that with the conversations around kind of the boys' club and things like that. It's factionalised within the leadership. I'm not 100% sure what the hell's going on in terms of what they want.
And there were people's noses that were put out when Sue joined Keir's team, and people who thought they should have been in that role. I think she came with huge experience. I think she will be, in the long term, a huge loss. She has an ability to make government and the wheels of government turn. And often when people come in from opposition, one of the hardest things is not the great ideas that they may have and what they may want to deliver, it's the ability to deliver it. And I think that's where Sue would have been priceless. And
that's what I mean. She's a very experienced administrator. So, getting rid of her and, putting in essentially what is a political campaigner just doesn't make sense in a role which is, I think, largely administrative. And, she has got a lot of respect of people within government. Fundamentally, the only person who doesn't like her is Simon Case, because she investigated all of the Partygate stuff, and I think she must have annoyed him a lot when she did that. So ultimately, she seems like a person who is very good at her role and has been doing it for a long time. To bring in Morgan McSweeney, a guy who's a campaigner, but also a guy who was in the role before and evidently got moved, is very strange to me. It's like a trust issue. But when we listen to the genius that is Lisa Nandy on the subject,
if it's all going so well, why did the Prime Minister have to sack his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray?
Well, he's incredibly decisive, and he will look.
No, he's incredibly indecisive. That's why the story rumbled on for so long. There were leaks going around that she would have been kicked out at conference. She was meant to be moved at conference. It didn't happen for weeks. This idea that he's decisive, he's extremely indecisive. We're talking about Boris Johnson levels of indecisiveness. He let the whole story around the bribes/freebies go on for, I think, over a month. And then he decided to pay it back. He sent ministers out there to defend his position. And then they were like, oh, what we did is wrong. We're going to give some back. It's crazy to me. He's incredibly indecisive.
Whole team and make decisions that he believes strengthens the team. He's moved me many times over recent years since he became leader of the opposition and then Prime Minister. That's that's the sort of leadership that he shows.
So the sort of leadership that you admire is somebody who picks the wrong person for such an important job.
I don't accept for a moment that he picked the wrong person. Sue Gray.
Well, ultimately, she's either the right person or the wrong person because she's got moved. Unless you're going to say for a very specific period of time she was the correct person. That's the only argument you could be making here.
An outstanding civil servant.
So why's she gone?
Well, she came in at a moment when we needed to be much bigger than the sum of our parts, when we needed to show that we weren't just, we hadn't just changed as a party, which under Keir's leadership we absolutely had, but that we were absolutely ready to govern.
But you're not ready to govern because you haven't really done much. The big stories out, over Labour's time really is the winter fuel allowance. That's really the biggest story. That and the dysfunctional stuff in Starmer's operation.
She helped us build that agenda for government that we've been cracking on and implementing.
You really haven't done that much, mate, I'll be honest. And Nandy's just the whole situation around the freebies, I think it kind of shows how kind of politically illiterate Starmer is.
We're now in a situation where, most of Sky News
tickets from Universal Music Group.
Most of Sky News was at these events in these same boxes as well, to be completely fair.
Who was there?
And you were there.
I paid for my tickets. I paid for my tickets.
Well, he's paying for his tickets.
Eventually.
He didn't, but yeah, eventually he paid for it. This is the genius we're dealing with here.
You paid for them.
But he's paying for his tickets, and he's
eventually
clear
I paid
about
for mine
that because he thinks it's
8 months
important.
earlier.
But
so please don't do that.
No, but he genuinely does think it's important.
Who else went
and he is
apart
paying
from
for
me
it.
from Sky?
Well, I went, and I've declared that in line with the ministerial code.
But you don't work for Sky.
But your suggestion is that somehow they shouldn't be going. My point is.
My point is that he can go, but he should pay for it himself. The fact that he got access to the ticket is in itself a bit dodgy because those tickets were very hard to get. It's not just the money angle; it's the accessibility to it as well.
That as long as they declare it and are absolutely upfront.
This is the biggest fumble from Boris Johnson. If he had announced and declared all of the kind of bribes that he got, it'd be much harder for Labour to kind of go down this road. So Boris Johnson kind of really fumbled this whole thing here. When you look at this stuff, it has emerged that she got a higher salary than him, and that was one of the main problems in it. The story briefed to the BBC by a number of sources paint a picture of a fractious relationship at the heart of government less than 3 months after Labour's general election victory. And so this is it. You had a lot of people who, as kind of Baroness Wallasey talked about, had their noses put out of place, or wherever the exact phrasing is. This is it. And with these people, I'd love to say and just insult them to this level and say,
second-rate duelist with a third-rate deck.
I wish I could say they're a bunch of second-rate advisors with third-rate ideas, but the reality is it's worse than that.
You're a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck.
These are third-rate advisors with fourth-rate ideas. Genuinely, I'm just baffled as to how these people function sometimes. But, you know, the way they've ousted someone who's actually competent at their job, and the fact that this man allowed it to happen shows how kind of toxic the environment is, but also how politically inept this man is as well. And it's incredibly frustrating to see someone who's good at their job be ousted by a bunch of clowns. Let's be honest, a bunch of jealous clowns. And it's going to be up to, you know, the new crew now to fix the comms team, because that wasn't Sue Gray's fault. Fix the comms team, and also let's see what the new chief of staff has got, or shall I say the old chief of staff, because he was formerly Starmer's chief of staff and then he got moved on. So we'll see how it goes for big Morgan McSweeney. But, you know, for Starmer here, like, it has been a mess of 100 days, I would argue. Hopefully they can actually get, you know, this workers' rights bill and all this other stuff passed, so then we can have some tangible benefits. But for me personally, I'm not impressed. I'm still disappointed. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.